How's it going, guys? This is Nick Evdos and James Short from Brian Tooley Racing, and today we want to talk a little bit about VVT cams and phase limiters. Here at BTR, we've designed a whole new lineup for our Gen 5 cams, specifically in mind for use with VVT. We feel that the ability to use the VVT that GM put in place somewhere around the mid-2000s when they came out, it's got benefits to where you can advance the cam, run an early intake close, still maintain torque like the factory did, and yet you have the ability to retard the cam at higher RPM, usually after peak torque, and make more power. Also, another benefit is when you do that, in a lot of applications, you might not have to use a converter that way. Just helps with idle quality, street manners, etc. When we designed our new Gen 5 cams, we took into account intake valve open event, which directly correlates to piston to valve clearance, especially on the intake side. Gen 5 engines do not have an intake valve pocket. They do have an exhaust valve pocket. So when you add duration to those motors, you have to be careful that you don't have any interference issues. We've measured some of our competitors' camshafts, and looking at the valve events, we've seen where things get pretty tight. So we wanted to make sure we offered a product that was not only drivability standards, maintained good valve motion and good valve dependability at high RPM, but also fits the engine and doesn't cause any other issues. Just less work for the customer. Here we have a Gen 5 Plus phaser limiter. You can tell on the Gen 5 Plus they actually have an apex seal that sits at the end of the spur of the gear, where a standard LT1 early style would not have that, or even a Gen 3, or should I say Gen 4 VVT limiter. When you install these in the engine, as we talked about before, we could use VVT limiters or lockouts. BTR offers its own line of VVT lockouts and limiter bushings. That bushing installs into the phase limiter. When we put the lockout version in, you can see that it has no ability to retard the camshaft. If we install a 4 degree, which is 4 degree at the camshaft, 8 degrees at the crankshaft, that allows the limiter to be tuned to retard the timing, again as we discussed before, for greater top end power and decreased pumping losses. And I think I'll have James talk about the tuning aspect of that as well.
Yep, with the VVT comes in the tuning aspect. Tuning is a little bit more involved with VVT active. The lockout simplifies tuning a lot because then it's more or less like an LS motor. You know, you don't have any of the VVT stuff to correlate to your virtual VE and some of the other tables involved with the VVT. So we offer, with our 4 degree limiter on our camshafts, we have the VVT tables on the cam card and downloadable by contacting one of the sales guys. So what that does, that allows you to literally populate the factory table or give it to your tuner so that they can populate the table based on whichever intake manifold you've got and which cam you have, and that'll give them a good starting point for tuning that camshaft in your vehicle. Furthermore, something that doesn't really pertain to the VVT, but just to tuning in general on the Gen 5 stuff, we want to go over is the fuel system. You know, it's direct injected now on all the Gen 5 stuff, and with that creates a whole nother dynamic of tuning. So the ECU fully controls the fuel rail pressure, which is a lot higher. It's much like a diesel, but not quite as high. And with that, you can control how much fuel pressure you have at different RPMs and different load values. And with that, you have a very elaborate injection timing table so that you can pinpoint exactly when the fuel is going to be injected in the cylinder. Obviously, you don't want to be injecting fuel when the spark is happening, or you don't want to be injecting fuel when the exhaust valve's open. So there's a very narrow window that you really want to try to target to get the best fuel atomization without fuel blowdown out the exhaust. So to touch base on that, running as much rail pressure as you can, especially at higher RPM, if you're running ethanol fuels, will keep that window a lot narrower, and generally it will make a lot more power. Now each application is a little bit different, so your tuner will have to mess around with the start of injection angle to determine where peak power is at each RPM interval. But that between the VVT and injection timing, rail pressure, those three things alone are quite a bit different and will make a lot more power if it's dialed in correctly.
And I just want to add to that you know, BTR, we've done significant testing on our Gen 5 applications with L83s, L86, LT1. We probably have 25 to 3,000 dyno pulls just on those two platforms alone. Everything from, you know, bottom end truck type torque cams to high RPM 2.1 horsepower per cubic inch stock bottom end camshafts. We've invested a significant amount of time to make sure that whatever we make is going to make as much or more power than all our competitors' camshafts. They deliver dependability. They deliver valve train stability at high RPM. We're not beating up valve tips. We're not hurting lifters. We're not knocking seats out of heads. You know, we want to make power every time, not just once or twice. And that way it's better value to the customer. You know, people spend a lot of hard-earned money on this stuff, and we want to make sure at the end of the day that they're getting everything they paid for and then some. So, but anything else to add, James?
No, I think that covers it all.
All right. We appreciate you guys coming and hanging out with us, and look forward to talking to you again.